Catherine Connolly, our president-elect, she's a lefty. Number one, the turnout was abysmal, 45%. 13% of them, as you said, and I was one of them, spoiled our vote. We went out and purposely drove to the polling station and filled in all kinds of things.
Let me float this idea to you. Taoiseach Domino. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This episode's returning an always amazing guest from that Emerald Isle across the Irish Sea, friend of mine, Derek Domino. How you doing, Derek?
Very well, Nick, and greetings to you and all your viewers from sunny Ireland, the home of sunshine holidays. As you're well familiar with, Nick, you've been here plenty of times. Great to be with you again. I always look forward to our little chit-chats.
Talking about childhood memories, I think Ireland may get more rain than Manchester, because almost every time I was in Ireland, it bloody rained.
Yeah. Oh, I think we're setting world records constantly, Nick. Can't forget about climate change. There's no climate change here in Ireland. It's still wet and rainy. Still wet and rainy.
Well, talk about wet and rainy. You had a presidential election last week, which in the UK passed us by. We didn't get much coverage of it at all, apart from one aspect of it, which was the spoiled ballot papers. People making the effort to go out and vote, looking at who was on offer, and then going, I don't want any of these idiots. So then writing things like none of the above and abusive terms and all sorts of things. And I believe it was about 13% of the votes were spoiled, which is a huge number. And that worked out about 213,000 individual ballot papers. But before we get into that, let's talk about the winner. I've been told that she's like the Irish version of Margaret Thatcher. I believe she's going to turn your country around. I believe she's full of ideas and vigor and determination. And even though she's a female, I've heard she's going to turn your country around. Did I dream that, or is that true?
Nick, I don't know who you are talking to, but you should probably take that person off your Christmas card list and stop talking to them about anything to do with politics for certain, because she's none of the above. Absolutely not. Now, Catherine Connolly, our president-elect, she's a lefty. She's a socialist. She's a far lefty. She came out of the Labour Party, the Irish Labour Party, back in the day. Worked her way up through the system. Left the Labour Party. I don't know if she left herself or they asked her to leave. I'm not sure. I don't really care, to be honest, because she's no use. She's no addition. She is the totem pole candidate for the left, the collective left, and that here in Ireland is everybody from Sinn Féin, which is, as you and I both know, and many of your viewers know, it's just a socialist party now, so it's nothing to do with nationalism in the sense that you and I understand nationalism. They're just a woke socialist lefty party now, verging on communistic party now. So they're the kind of the big people in the room, and then you've got all these kind of spurious other lefty parties ranging from the Social Democrats and the Labour Party, and then you have the complete and utter communist people before profit, they call themselves. It sounds very nice and benign and touchy-feely, but I just call them people before gulags, because their policies always end up in gulags, as we both know. Anyway, so they all kind of had a coalition, the left, and they chose Catherine Connolly as their person. She seemed to be their type of person, and they all coalesced behind her. Now, they were up against initially two other candidates. Now, we're not even talking about the people who didn't even make it onto the ballot. That's a whole other thing that I think we talked about that before with regard to Conor McGregor. A lot of people who should have gotten into the race and had a go, well, they were just kept out. And it just whittled down to three. And then one of the main parties guys, Jim Gavin, he ran into the weeds because it found that he had been doing some bits and pieces nefarious back in the day to do it. He was a landlord. He didn't give some tenant back their rent, and that came out, and that became a big issue. Now, he was a dud from the start anyway. I mean, he had no ideas. He was just a plant. He couldn't speak very well, couldn't articulate himself very well. He had no vision. So he was a damp squib from the start. But I think they put him in because he was a football manager. He managed our Gaelic football Dublin team very successfully. You know the way they pick these people and they think, oh, that'll probably sell. Stick so and so in there. That'll play well to this crowd or that crowd. But the person themselves really have nothing going for them. Anyway, he bowed out. So that left a three-horse race as a two-horse race, or as I called it, a two-donkey race. So you had basically Catherine Connolly, the left candidate, and you ended up with Heather Humphreys, who was the other main governmental party candidate. She was an ex-minister, she's a TD. She again, just another leftist, because they're all left, Nick. They're all it's just how far left are you in Irish politics is the thing. Anyway, she was bland. She wasn't really, couldn't get anything going. There was no pizzazz there. And on top of that, there's a deep-seated anger and resentment here in Ireland for the ruling parties. I mean, the hatred is similar to what you've got across the water there in Britain for the Labour Party, and I suppose the Conservative Party as well. They've been in power so long and the thing has gotten so out of control and buggered up that there's just a deep-seated resentment now. So no matter who they put up, it was not going to fly. There was always going to be a look, we don't care. You people are wrecking the place. So no matter who you put forward, we're gonna give them the middle finger. So that's how it ended up. We ended up with this farce. That's what it was, Nick. It wasn't an election. It was a farce. It was an absolute travesty of an operation, supposedly in a democratic country, which is again farcical in and of itself. And Catherine Connolly easily won. She easily won because number one, the turnout was abysmal, 45%. The total electorate was 3.6 million. 1.6 million actually bothered to show up. And of that 1.6 million who did show up, 13% of them, as you said, and I was one of them, spoiled our vote. We went out and purposely drove to the polling station and filled in all kinds of things, from the sublime to the ridiculous and to the lewd, I would say. People drawing pictures of all kinds of things that you'd only see in Viz comic or something. But anyway, there was a lot of messages written on these things. And it was a very, if you like, a very direct form of democracy there taken by the citizens, because they were writing in their own messages. They were writing in very poignant points and messages to the political class. And I featured some of them here in the channel because some of them are priceless. Some of them are very funny, but some of them were making very, very good points too. Anyway, the Spoiled the Vote campaign kind of got legs and it became viral, and people like me were talking about it, many other people, and a lot of people went out and physically spoiled their votes. 13%, as you said, just under 214,000 people went out and spoiled their vote. Now, in the last election, the presidential election, that was 1%, 1.2%, I think, people spoiled their votes. And now it was 13%. Now, if you add to that the 7% of people who voted for Jim Gavin, that was the guy who had to bow out, the third guy, because he bowed out, but he was still left on the ballot. Maybe they had them printed or something. They couldn't take him off the thing. So he was still on it, but he wasn't in the race. And 7% of the electorate voted for him, who couldn't be elected. So to me, that's another spoiled vote. So if you add the physical spoiled vote, that's people drawing pictures of genital parts and various different messages, and you add that to the other spoiled votes, which was voting for a candidate who wasn't even in it, that's over 20%, Nick. That's over 20% of the people who bothered going to the poll gave the middle finger to the government and to the left. They voted against all of them, voted against all of the above. So that's where we're at.
Right, so that is shocking. In a democracy, that is shocking. Now, your political class would have seen that. I'm presuming it was all over the news for days about the spoiled vote. I couldn't hide that. What has there been a backlash? Do you think? I mean, I'm going to ask the question, but I know the answer. The answer is no. Are the political class listening to those 13-20% and going, do you know what? They're voters I could attract to me if I change my ways? Or are those 13% are just being ignored, like the whole population is being ignored?
Well, the first thing to say about that is that in the run up, the lead up to the election, there was a concerted campaign by the political class, if you like. I just count them all as the same because they are all the same. You know, the so-called opposition are no better than the people who are in power. It's like you swapping the Conservatives for Labour. You know, you think it was bad and then it got worse. Now, if we did the same here with swapping the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government with a Sinn Féin led government, you know, it's bad now and it would just get worse. It's no even, you know, inkling of it going in a positive direction. So so basically, they tried to poo-poo this whole spoil the vote campaign, and it was a grassroots campaign, really, Nick. It was just ordinary people like me talking to people that I know, and them talking to people that they know, and such as dissatisfaction amongst ordinary Irish people that this started to get traction, and people are like, you know, that actually makes sense because they've left us almost no ways to really voice our anger. We keep trying and they keep just ignoring us, you know, and calling us far right and calling us, you know, agitators, we're wrong thinkers and all kinds of, you know, the usual terms they throw out there. So this got legs and they tried to dampen it down. And then it happened. And then the numbers came out. And as you say, you can't argue with the facts. You know, you can't disagree. You might like the fact, but they are what they are. And that many people came out, which was an earthquake. It was an absolute earthquake. And just the other day, it was actually almost comical. Simon Harris, the Tánaiste, which is our kind of deputy prime minister, and he switches round. They kind of have a kind of merry-go-round thing with himself and Micheál Martin, and they just kind of swap it over and back. It's a very tidy arrangement. So anyway, he's just waiting to become the top guy again. But he came out and said, "Listen, you know, this whole immigration thing, yeah, it's a bit out of control and yeah, a bit high, and the system is broken." And now this is like I've been saying this for years too. So have many other people. We were all chastised as being far right and fascist. Now suddenly he's come out giving this press conference. He said everything I've been saying. And then Micheál Martin came out and said, "Yeah, no, you know, Simon's right about that. Yeah, I totally back up what he's saying there. He's right on the money there." And Pascal Donoghue came out, the finance minister. He go, "Yeah, that's you know, that's totally. I mean, just that's self-evident." Now, Nick, this is all nonsense talk because they have no intention of changing anything. Absolutely none. And anybody who thinks that these vacuous statements that they've made are going to lead to any change, well, I've got a bridge to sell you because they're not going to change. But it proved and highlighted to me and many others that they're rattled, Nick. They're rattled. They didn't say that because they've suddenly had a road to Damascus moment and the scales have fallen from their eyes. They now realize is no, that's not what happened. What happened is they're worried. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about their careers. Their advisors are worried about their jobs and their careers. And their backbenchers are worried about their jobs and careers. And that's all it is. And it's just, we need to throw some meat out here. We need to give the dog a bone with this. And we'll talk a bit of this. And hopefully that'll take the fizz out of the situation, calm everybody down. And then after it dies down, it'll just be back to business as usual. You know how these people work.
I do. Let me give you some what I perceive as good news. So it's very hard to change a government's direction because they all believe in it. It's no, they inherit the status quo. They think this is what I do to stay in power, to keep my pension, to keep my amazing wage. Your version of MPs will be on amazing wages like our British ones are. But the first way, the steps to make them change is this. First of all, you have to get them talking about the things we want them to talk about. Doesn't matter if they believe it or not. Doesn't matter if they're lying to us. You get them to talk about the things we want them to talk about. Then we get them to talk about things we want them to talk about that they then start believing. The next stage is we get them to talk about the things they believe in and actually want to change. It's like 10 steps. It sounds like you've got to the first step now that we only reached a year ago, which is Finally, you've got politicians talking about the things you want to talk about. Doesn't matter if they believe it or not, but you've broken through now. They're talking about it. That's step one, and hopefully the other steps will come. And the more steps they make, the quicker the next step comes. You ought to see what we're doing in the UK now. We've got senior politicians. Let's talk about the Tory party, horrendous party for 14 years. One of their number two politician now is talking about banning the burqa. We've got Tory politicians saying we're going to deport illegals. Nobody was saying that 6 months ago. Reform UK, where everybody thinks going to be our saviour, and they're better than Tories and Labour, of course they are. 6 months ago, they were saying they weren't deporting anybody. It can't be done. Once you break through, once you get them talking about the things, and once they realise this is how I stay in power, politicians will flip on a dime because they don't. Most politicians I've met with and worked with never believed in the policies they were talking about. That's my job. My job is to sell this policy. I don't have to believe it. I just get paid for doing it. So I think you're on the first step there for change.
Yeah, well, let's hope you're right about that, and I think you are. And it's like nothing happens for a long time, and then suddenly things start happening really quickly. That's if you ever look at any revolution, it seems like nothing's happening for ages, and then in one weekend everything just blows up and the whole thing comes crashing down. So the ironic thing about it is the president really doesn't have any power here, Nick. I mean, it was a
Well, that was something I wanted to end the conversation on was the powers of the president, because across the UK and probably the world, we think, oh, Irish president, that's your version of Trump. They're going to hold all the power. They're going to do this, going to do that. But my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is your president is more like our king and former queen, as in the head of state. They may sign off legislation. They may have certain tiny, tiny powers, but they have no real power. That's your parliament.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Nick. I mean, our president is ceremonial. It's like again, like King Charles. He kind of gives speeches. He greets dignitaries and hosts banquets. And yes, technically, the president signs things into law. If the president really is very iffy about something or really has a bad feeling about something that the legislation that's come to him or her, he can refer it to I think a council of state. It's kind of like he can refer it off to look. We need to kick this thing around a bit more before I'm going to sign it. Now, okay, it rarely happens. I think in 14 years of our current president, soon to be ex-president, I think he only referred one bill. I think so. It's not. I mean, yeah, it's technically it can be done, but it isn't really done. And then he hands out the kind of off seals of office, and when the Taoiseach wants to, call it a day, he goes to see the president, whereas your prime minister goes to see the king or queen. So it's very, very similar in that way. So it really, the president really can't do anything. But as I said to you when we were talking about the whole Conor McGregor thing, do you remember those heady days that Conor McGregor floating around the mix, kicking chairs, knocking over tables and all that? Anyway, that I kind of predicted that and run into the sand, and it did. But look, Conor he might come again. He might come again in some other guise in a future date. And look, I'm here for it. Let's have a go with that. And the more disruptors we have at the moment, the happier I am. Basically, I'll take a win wherever I can get one. So look, it was a nothing election in terms of the president can't do anything in a real political sense. Now, they could be an unmerciful pain in the ass. They could really ruffle feathers. I mean, if you got a president in there who was, let's say, on our team, oh, they could really embarrass the government all the time because they're giving speeches. They're going to meet whoever Trump. They're going to meet the president of, I don't know, Indonesia the next day. They give speeches and they give press conferences. And now, according to the rules, the president is supposed to vet all the speeches and whatever they're going to say. You're supposed to run that all by the government. And the government's supposed to sign off on it, say, right, yeah, we approve this message. But presidents, like all politicians, they give conferences. They give press conferences. They chit chat to journalists. They do off the cuff remarks. I mean, the amount of stuff that could be said and opinions voiced on those occasions could cause serious problems. But no, even though it was a kind of a nothing election in terms of no, the president is not going to solve our problems, even if they wanted to, they couldn't. But this was the perfect opportunity, and we don't get many, Nick, like yourselves, we don't get many opportunities to give the regime a good kicking. And that's exactly what happened. They got a right good kicking.
When's your next elections? Not for president, but just in general. When are your next elections? Because this campaign seems to have taken off. I would imagine there's loads of people in Ireland going, I didn't turn up to vote because I couldn't be bothered. I hate them all. But if I'd have known about this campaign, I would have made an effort and I would have voted none of the above. I'd have spoilt my ballot paper. There's more people wanting to do this in your island. When's your next set of elections?
I believe they can run for another 4 years. You're talking about 2029. So they're not long into this current gig. And so they probably thought, okay, we managed to dodge another bullet there. We're back in power. We can kind of do what we like for another at least 4 years, maybe 8 months, 10 months before the next. We'll start to make all the usual noises. We're going to sort things out. We're going to fix this, that, and the other. And that's business as usual to them. And it's the same over there with your guys. I mean, they start making all these noises coming up to an election, and as soon as they get in, back in, the whole thing's forgotten about the next week. So we've got about 4 years to run. But the problem, as you said there, is there's a kind of a thing getting going here that's not normal for them. It's not business as usual. This kind of anger is a new development in terms of Irish politics and the political landscape. And the vote spoilers, Nick, it wasn't all 18, 25-year-olds, just because they don't show up anyway, mostly. It wasn't. When I looked at the spread of the demographics, the age demographics, there was a lot of kind of 50 plus voters in there. People who never spoilt their vote, never would have dreamt of spoiling their vote, and would always have voted. Well, they still voted, but they did something they never would have contemplated doing before. And this particularly rattles the government parties because Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, the two big parties, their vote up, they've got nobody under 60, Nick. They've got nobody under 60. Their voters are all 60 plus. Okay, maybe 55 plus. They've got nobody under that. So they're looking at this, and not only was the result a huge number in terms of numbers, it was a huge block of their voters that they would have just assumed were in the bag, that they would have just counted them in and then tried to kind of rope in some other demographics that traditionally might be on the fence. But this was their core people who are jumping ships now. And it's not like they're jumping to Sinn Féin or the Social Democrats. They're just exiting the stage. They're just saying, listen, you're all wrong. You're all corrupt. You're all on the wrong, going in the wrong direction. And we're sending a signal that we don't want any of you. And what it was a cry for something new, I believe. A cry for something new. And if that something new can emerge, and I hope it does, then there's a huge block waiting for the taking there. Absolutely waiting to go, ready to go.
Absolutely. And I reckon the reason why the spoilt votes was more towards the end of the age range is because those people remember a better Ireland. Those people remember when the island was functional, when life was better, when you may have had less money, but I think we're all beginning to realize now money doesn't make you happy. Buying the latest iPhone doesn't make you happy when you're scared to pull that out in public in case you get stabbed for it. So those people are remembering a better time, an Irish time when everybody felt Irish, was proud to be Irish. And you could leave, the old cliche, you could leave your door open, you knew your neighbours. And some of that's never coming back, but they remember a better time. Now, you're talking about where they're going to go next. I think your country now is ripe for a new party. If someone like Conor McGregor invested his millions in a grassroots party, a bit like the way reform has exploded over the last year, I think you're ripe for that. Is there any sign? Is there anyone out there who possibly I mean, it takes money to run a political party. Is anyone out there who maybe you're thinking, I hope he or she does it? Well, what's going on there?
The problem that the right has and has had for the past few years is it's very scattered. It's a very scattered. It's not a thing. And whereas you had somebody like Nigel Farage, Nigel is a man, a flawed character in many ways, but he was certainly a totem pole. He was in the ether a long time. He's been floating around a long time. He understands the game. He understands how it works, and he's kind of something you could you know pitch your tent around. Um, we don't have anything like that. We have a lot of different people in the mix, various people on social media, YouTube, and doing all different things. People who have kind of run for elections and maybe got close but didn't quite get in. There's a lot of characters of all stripes in the right on the right end of the spectrum, if you like. But nobody has broken through. Nobody has kind of. It's kind of like because people ask me this all the time. Who would you go for? Who do you think's going to do it? And I just kind of say, look, I don't see it at the moment, but when I when I see it, I'll know it. I'll know when I see it. You know what I mean? If it pops up, and I hope it does, or somebody pops up, I'll know it when I see it. And at the moment, there's a lot of very capable people and a lot of very articulate people and a lot of people really giving it their all to try and keep pushing the thing forward. But nobody has kind of it's head and shoulders, if you know what I mean. Nobody is now. As I said, the time is ripe. You know this as well as I do because even from watching as you do, the time is ripe. There's a massive block of voters there just for the taking. But it's going to take a very particular type of person to break through what would be a tsunami of mainstream media vitriol that would be heaped on them, Nick. Because, I mean, we're talking, the government have the whole mainstream media in their back pocket. And if anybody, man or woman of any age or from any background, puts their head up and starts to get a bit of traction in that direction, they will be destroyed by the mainstream media. That's a big ask.
It is. The only consolation is now we have social media, which they can't control, and that sort of leveled the playing field a little bit. You're right about not knowing who the potential savior is at the moment, because when we look back at history, it always looks obvious, but that's only looking back through history. We go, oh, Thatcher came through, or the Trump came through, or the Italian prime minister, same with the Argentinian prime minister. But until they won, until they did things, they were nobodies. No one thought they were going to win. It's only in hindsight we go, oh, it was obvious Trump was going to win. It wasn't obvious at the time. Same with Thatcher. So I hope one of those people you're looking at has the break. And what normally happens is it's an incident. Something happens that they excel suddenly, or they give a speech of a lifetime, and suddenly people go, oh, and never saw him in that light or her in that light before. And hopefully something like that will happen, because I've got a vested interest in this. If Ireland can save itself, that's good for the UK. Just like if the UK can save itself, that's good news for Ireland. We're cousins. We've got a symbiotic relationship here. We can't have you dysfunctional because it'll infect the UK. Vice versa, exactly the same. We're joined at the hip. We need to save these islands that we call, Great Britain and Southern Ireland. We need to save them.
Absolutely. And as you say, we have such a long history, okay, there's parts of it haven't been that great, but look, for the most part, we're cousins, there has been squabbles, there's been falling outs and arguments along the way. But at the end of the day, we have to figure this out, I think, both of us together, and tic-tac off each other and talk to each other and come up with strategies that work. Because if Ireland fixes its problems tomorrow, they'll all flood over to you and up the north, and vice versa. If you get your house in order tomorrow, they'll all flood in here. So that's why it's got to be a two pronged approach, I believe. And I do hope, as you said, somebody does emerge. I think if it happens, and hopefully it will, it'll be a viral moment, Nick. As you said, somebody will get up someday and give an absolute barnstormer of a speech. And everybody will be left with their mouth just hanging open, saying, yes. And I'll be the first one. I'll be the first one on that train. If somebody does emerge, I will push that as hard as it can be pushed. and many others will too, because we're waiting. We're ready. We're ready to go. We just are waiting for that person to suddenly emerge. And as you said, it's always easy to look back in hindsight. We don't have the benefit of hindsight. We have to do this live, as they say. But look, let's hope we can all get to a better place and the right people will emerge and take the helm.
Let me float this idea to you. Taoiseach Domino.
No, no. Nick, I have no political aspirations whatsoever. I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm a social commentator. I try to kind of pick through the weeds of what's happening and bring information to ordinary people because they're not getting it, as you know, from the sources they should be getting it from. I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. And as I said, when the right person does emerge, they will have me on their team. I will be batting for them 100% on my channel, and I'll be happy to do so.
Derek, thank you so much for coming on today. And I will leave you with this: cometh the hour, cometh the man.
Well, let's hope so, Nick. Yeah, that sayings are a saying for a reason. And let's hope it comes true on this occasion. As always, Nick, it's great to be with you. Love to be having these little chats and we sort out problems. We at least throw them around the place in the comment section, sorts out the problem. So delighted again, and thank you for inviting me on. And I hope to chat to you in the not so distant future.
Thank you.